podcast on real relationships. My name is Sophie Passon and I am a relationship expert, international speaker and best-selling author of the book Your Other Half. I decided to start this podcast because in my opinion, relationships are currently not being portrayed as what they really are. Whether you're watching the news, social media, TV, the perception given to people is wrong. And my aim is to talk about what happens in the real world, talk about real stories, and listen to what real people think, do, or go through, as opposed to creating expectations of something that doesn't actually exist. I may not agree with everything they said by my guests, but it is their chance to express their opinions and their stories. So today we have Tina Rose, and we are going to talk about intimacy. Hi Tina, how are you?
Hello, Sophie. I'm great.
So tell us a bit about yourself, please.
Okay, so I'm what most people know of as a relationship and intimacy consultant. I'm also an accredited mediator where I go into organizations and families and resolve and dissolve disputes.
Mm-hmm.
Actually started my business helping females, professional females, to rid themselves of abusive relationships. I also found that, as a result of many of us women, I being a survivor myself, getting into these relationships, we really didn't know how to be in relationships, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of us women, professional women, wasn't able to balance one, our relationships, but as well as balancing relationships and career at the same time.
And life.
And life, right? And so I find that, when we know how to show up in life, to be really honest with you, as you said, we can manage any relationship if we know how to show up as our authentic selves and what that really looks like, who we are, what we are, why we exist. We're able now to show up in relationships, whether they're healthy or unhealthy. We are able to make a better decision as to, is this for me? And if it is for me, if we're married, if it is for me, how can we now navigate the various things that we're going to encounter? So that's where I'm at. Yeah.
And one of the main things in a relationship is intimacy.
Absolutely. And, as it relates to intimacy, it actually refers to a close familiarity or friendship with those who are most closest with, right? So it may be a deep connection with your boyfriend, your husband. It could even be family, friends, or the other, right? It's sometimes an emotional connection. It's a physical connection. It's a spiritual connection. It's a financial connection. It's every connection. But how do you now navigate intimacy? And how many people realize how important it is? Because for most people, when we talk about intimacy, the first thing they think
sex
is sex. That's it. And I'm looking and saying, that's why so many relationships are falling apart, because we believe that if we aren't having sex, we're not intimate. But the reality is, I say sometimes to my clients, I say, when was the last time you held each other's hands? When was the last time you sat on their lap? When was the last time you brushed across the air and just said, I love you? Just the slightest things. When was the last time you had a conversation of your goals, your dreams, your desires? All of that is a level of intimacy, which many of us don't look at as intimacy. So that's why so many people are falling by the wayside. And when you talk about, emotional intimacy, it's just a matter of talking about your feelings, your wants, your desires. All of those things are intimacy.
When I was prepping for this, I thought really intimacy in that sense is just being vulnerable, isn't it? Because
completely
stuff you don't want people to know, in essence.
Mm-hmm. And it's very true. And that's where a lot of us professional or business women struggle. Believe it or not, I don't know if it's because we feel like we've arrived in this career world that now we can't let our guards down to look weak to anybody else. But the reality is being vulnerable is healthy. Being vulnerable is really not for you. It's not for the other person. It's for you, as we talk about forgiveness, but being vulnerable is for me so that I now can show up and be my authentic self.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's a great challenge for many, and not just women, men alike. Right.
Oh, totally. Even more so.
Yeah.
And I think, as you say, there's a difference between intimacy, the physical side of things,
yes,
and even the romantic side of things. And I think people kind of like interestingly enough, like I'm a great sucker for some of these like shows like Married at First Sight or
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. Anyway, and what do they say when they say they had sex? Instead of saying we had sex, they say we got intimate.
Yes.
So it
That's
seems
the first thing they
everyday
say.
language
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
confused with sex. So there's no
Yeah.
wonder no one knows what it is.
Exactly. And what they don't realize is when there's poets, they're already building trust. Because really, being intimate is also a level of building trust, right? Having those conversations. So being intimate with someone is having an emotional or deep level of conversation that ultimately connects you and builds trust. So while they're in those parts, they're building trust with one another. So when they do get physically intimate, now they got a deeper level of trust or connection.
And that's it. Intimacy is a number of things, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
How
Mm-hmm.
would you define it so that you could explain it to a 5-year-old?
Okay, okay, wait a minute. Let's see here. It's being able to
And
trust
that
some.
people sometimes like need to
Yeah,
in so
yeah,
simple terms that they're like, oh, okay.
yes. And you know what? When you think about it, I think of my grandson who's 6. When you think of that, it's really being able to be comfortable enough to come and tell somebody a little secret. There you go.
Yeah.
Do you trust Nana to tell me if this hurts? Yes, this hurts. I fell on my knee and it hurts. There you go. That's a level of intimacy. Trusting me enough to know that if he tells me he injured his knee, Nana's now going to go and do something about it. We're going to take out the first aid kit. We're going to put a band-aid on it. And that goes for relationships. When you have a level of intimacy, no matter what level of intimacy, that person in return wants to fix it, wants to help you, wants to support you, wants to heal, all of those things. So when you start a relationship and there's no level of emotional intimacy, because we can have physical intimacy at any moment,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Even if somebody's flirting, even if somebody's being too forward and brushing across you, touching your shoulder or whispering in your ear, that's a level of intimacy, right? So most of us think the level of intimacy is having sex. So when they have sex, not now we're on to something, and not realizing it starts before that.
yeah. Going back to the fixing things, because that's an interesting point.
Mm-hmm.
Men like to fix things, women just want to vent. So straight away, you've got a bit of an issue here, aren't you?
Yes, yes. And you know what? Yeah, men like to fix things, but then when you think about it, and women like to vent, because men are more physical or what's the word? They're more physical, and we are more emotional, right? And so the reality is when you think about it, they want to fix things, they want to fix the physical side of things. Women, we want to fix the emotional side of things,
Mm.
right? And so when you find that level of connection, it could be difficult, especially if that relationship started off physically. And the male now believes this is the type of relationship you have. So
Yeah.
we don't have a connection. Now, us women, for whatever reason we were created, we are emotional beings. So when we have sex with somebody, automatically, and if it was amazing, even if it wasn't amazing, there's
It
some level of
needs more
commitment we
in a
feel.
way, doesn't it?
Yes.
It's a bit, not going too graphic here, but when you think about how it happens, you're literally getting someone in.
Yes.
Where for them, it's
Really.
not quite the same in that respect.
It's true. We are, and I love that. So we really do let them in. We feel like because we've let them physically penetrate our lives, that now they have the authority to do whatever they please with us. And the reality is, one, they don't. And that goes back to when we know who we are and why we are and what we want in relationships and what relationships should look like. For us, we in return are not in a position to accept whatever comes our way. We now know what we want. And
Yeah.
even if the physical attachment is really, really great, we can look at the other pointers and areas in our lives and say, okay, that's just going to be a one night stand, or that's just going to be somebody that when I need or I have an itch, I'm going to let them scratch it.
Mm.
you know?
I think that I can't remember. I can't even remember if I read this years ago or if I came to that conclusion myself years ago. But one of no, I think I came to the conclusion myself. It's not. There's no science. There's no data behind this.
Yeah.
But one of
Yes.
the things I kind of noticed was that for a woman to develop a physical connection, she needs to have an emotional connection first. Where
Hmm.
for a man to develop an emotional connection, he needs to have a physical connection first. So that's where it kind of like doesn't work at all.
Yes. Yeah,
And
it's so
that's
true.
where it can clash and easily be misconstrued and all the rest of it.
Yeah, and that's why we get situations where when I have clients say, well, Tina, I thought it was so much more.
Yeah.
We've been messing around for the last several months, and he's telling me he's not committed. That doesn't mean he was committed to me. And I'm saying to myself, well, what type of connection did you have prior to? What type of connection do you have throughout? Right. So
Yeah.
there's no level of even intellectual intimacy, right? Where you could sit down and share your ideas and, your beliefs and values. Those things are key. And when you don't have intellectual intimacy, that's really physical intimacy overshadows us, right? So sometimes you could be in relationships, and that's many people. I mean, I talk to couples now, married couples. They don't know just about nothing about each other. All they know is they work here, they live here, they like this to eat. That's it. So when I say, intellectual intimacy, how do you talk about your values, your beliefs, your past histories? What do you like? Your books?
It just becomes routine. That's a problem, isn't it? I've seen that a few times where it just becomes like, right, you look after the kids, blah, blah, blah. And then 30
Yes.
years have gone by, and all of a sudden, you know how to take their toast, you know how to have their tea, but you have no idea who that person is.
No idea. And that's why they call, like, I'm an empty nester, my husband and I now. And I find a lot of, I actually have a new couple who are empty nesters, and they are so lost. Because before was the run of the meal, take the children, they had such a structured lifestyle. Now they're looking at each other and wondering, who are you? Outside of
Mm,
being mom and dad, who are you?
yeah.
Outside of picking up from football and soccer and going to this doctor's appointment, this meeting, who are you? And so when they look at each other, it's kind of difficult because they're sitting on either ends of the couch and they're trying to figure out what's the next move? How do I do this?
I remember, like, without giving the least of information available so people could not be identified, an
Mm-hmm.
event where a couple who has kids
Yes.
said out loud, "Oh, we went out the other night, and without the kids interrupting us, we didn't have anything to talk about." And I was
That's so
like,
true.
"This is like, you need to do something about this ASAP because here's your sign. If you've already lost conversation just because it's not
Yes.
about picking up this one and doing that and whatever."
And you know what? That's so true. That's why they say I always encourage, to take those weekends, to take that one night a week, to take that whatever time you have outside of when the children are at ballet or football or violin, whatever they're doing, their extracurricular activities, right? Whatever they're doing, when they're at those activities, go on a nice date. It could be an easy coffee, it could be a lunch, and just talk about the various things that's going on with your personal life. How are you feeling today? I was thinking that maybe next year we could take a trip, just us, or, I look at these debates and I think about this and I just talk about your various personal perspectives.
I'm a great believer that details that we're like, oh, that's not important. There's no point talking about that.
Yes,
Actually, the details are what becomes the big things over time.
yes. Yeah, very true, very true. And I think that's why it's so important to re-up every every day one, every week.
We're talking about the side of like maintaining this intimacy in a routine situation, but then you've got the other half of the coin, which is maintaining intimacy when you're
Yes,
busy. And I thought of that because I'm aware at the time of recording this. Um,
yes,
we're in the lead up to Christmas, and straight
yes.
away that creates
Mhm,
tensions with
mhm.
family members or whatever. So, how do you maintain that through that time? But more importantly, afterwards, because it's easy to drift apart for like 2 weeks, and
It
then
is,
you've got to get
it
back on
is.
track, aren't you?
It is. And one of the things I often say, like right now, I have several of my couples doing kind of like a campaign for themselves, right? And that's just simply, writing a letter, putting it in your husband or wife's lunch bag, putting a message on the car steering wheel, sending a WhatsApp or a text or just an email just to say, babe, something sexy, whatever, whatever your partner, desires. Simply just putting on lipstick and kissing it and giving it to your, like just the various things just to stay connected. Call and say, babe, this morning was, I mean, my goodness, was so great. Or babe, after these next 2 weeks, oh my goodness, the last time when we was in Mexico, I just can't wait for that. And it's just keeping the idea alive, just keeping those memories alive versus the 2 weeks everybody's stressed up preparing for Christmas parties and family parties and getting around people that you don't necessarily like. In opposite
Right.
family members, even your own family members. How do you
Right.
manage those stresses? And you manage those stresses with keeping the emotional and physical and intellectual intimacy connected. And like we said, we talked about earlier, Sophie, everything's not sex, but it's just so simple sometimes just to tap each other on the rear, tap each other on the stomach, brush claws, and just say, I love you in your ear or wait till later. Just anything that works for your partner. Yeah.
Recognizing the signs of their stress, recognizing that the family member wound them up, that sort of stuff.
Yes. And I think that's why, and this is one of the most important areas I would say in a relationship, because when you're building that intellectual intimacy, physical intimacy, spiritual intimacy, like every form of intimacy that they have, what you're doing is experimental intimacy, whatever it is, what you're now doing is one, building a level of trust and commitment. However, you're also giving your partner the ends as to what you like, what you don't like, what bothers you, what doesn't bother you. So when you have these big events, whether it's Christmas or New Year's or birthday or Easter, whatever it is, and you're around situations that may be conflicting, you're now able to look at your partner and they automatically know if something's going to bother you or if something's bothering you. That's why it's so important to not just think the bedroom, the couch, or the table is the most important part of your relationship, but more so the emotional side of it and the
It's
intellectual.
communication, isn't it, in essence?
100%.
In essence.
100%.
So,
Another area, Sophie, I wanted to address is spiritual intimacy. I find a lot of people don't have these conversations until they're married. And then you're raising children and you're Mormon and you're Christian or you're Buddhist and you're Muslim and you're just so many things. And I think it's so important. And I think one of the things I find too is people don't talk about their spiritual aspect because they feel like they're going to push you off, right? And because they say, well, I don't want them to think, but you're actually talking about who you are, like as a person, what your beliefs are, because more than likely, that's what you're going to be stemmed from, right?
you say that, but I think, yeah, definitely there is that, but there's also someone I know was married for a number of years, whatever.
Yes.
Then a particular event occurred and she became a Christian, but he didn't.
Okay.
So that changes the dynamic in a way, doesn't it?
It really does. You're actually talking about my husband and I. Yeah, but yes, I did when we got
I
married.
wouldn't, but yeah.
Right. I became a Christian once. I was raised like that, but when we become adults, we do our own thing and so forth. And I remember a few years into my marriage, I decided I want to change. And I didn't even plan. I just started going to church and I decided, let me just start picking back up my religious side of my life, right? To feel like that made me feel healed. It was a couple of years. And I remember that was very, very challenging
Yeah, I can imagine.
because my routine, my
Change.
rituals, and all of those aspects changed. My husband was still that same person. And
Yeah.
now, how was I conveying conversation with him? Because a lot of what we talked about before and the way and the language in which I use, because I was the one to use a whole lot of foul language, tons of it, right? The way in which I changed, it was kind of confusing to him because he's now saying, wait a minute, this is what we used to do. We used to have a lot of fun doing this. No, she's saying she doesn't feel ethically as a religious, as a Christian, she doesn't feel right doing it. So all of those things took time. But one of the things I managed to maintain later on, I think after a year or two, maybe the first year, was I had to remember why. I had to remember that I had to stay connected with him. So what are our goals, wishes, and dreams together? Because as a couple, it's actually us against the world. But sometimes when we become, whether it be Christian or any, whatever it is we do that changes in our marriage, it becomes us against our husband, and or husband against our wife. We've got to remember, we've got to show up whole as one together. So I had to find a way, as well as he had to find a way to accept my change, as well as I had to find a way to accept that I had changed and show up in my marriage. And that's very challenging.
Yeah, and so that leads on quite nicely, so this is with cultural background, because
Yeah.
race, gender, age, socioeconomics, all of that is going to have an impact on how we perceive intimacy to be, for starters.
Yes, yes. And you know what? That's so true. And I think that's another area that, well, to be really honest, nowadays, that's the first thing people want to know. How much money what do you do for a living? Because
Yeah,
it automatically,
it's superficial, isn't it?
it is. And because automatically they say, well, if I say I'm a doctor, oh, he must make a lot of money, or she must make a lot of money. Or if you say, oh, I'm a custodian in a school, the first thing you think, that's not, if you're looking at socioeconomic background, right? And you're thinking the status in which you want to give. But what people don't realize is, right, you could both be waitresses. You could be a waiter, he could be a waitress. It's really how you maintain your money. It's also how you maintain the relationship. You could have a much stronger connection with your waiter husband, and you could be a sales lady than two doctors and lawyers can be, right? And I think that's a challenge. But the other part of that is your culture, your race, whether same sex or opposite sex, like no matter what it is, I think that's the conversations that must be had up front. People say, well, we don't want to get that deep. Well, you know what? You need to get that deep.
Yeah.
Because who's to know, for instance, who's to know that we get involved, hypothetically speaking, if we get involved, right, and I have a gay or lesbian brother or sister, right, and not knowing that you have a phobia, say for instance, you hate them for whatever reason, because something might happen to you or whatever it is, and then we get really connected. All of a sudden, you're coming around to my family dinner or breakfast, right? And here's my sister or brother that might be gay or lesbian or whatever it is, right? And they show up, and it's automatic friction. And you're looking and saying, what happened? How did this, what's going on? Why is he or she so fussy? Why did she leave or he leave? Because you never had the conversation. And I'm not saying that you should have a conversation. Do you like gays or lesbians? Absolutely not. But what I am saying is that we need to have those personal conversations about who we are, our life. So automatically, I'm not saying to tell all our business up front, oh, I was sick at 6 and my mother and my brother, my father. No, but who's your family? I have 2 siblings and a mom. And believe it or not, one sibling's married to a man and one sibling's married to a woman. And she's a woman that's just sometimes people want to figure out, how do I say that? Well, you could talk about it as a joke and like a highlight, right, in your conversation, because you also want to understand. You may have a grown child that meet it. So you want to have those conversations, a light conversation, so that you can get a little feel as to the response. That will tell you as well. If this person say, I see some friction here, what's going on? Because some people put people in their lives, even with children, and they don't like their children because of these things and everything. But I think when it comes to culture and religion and race and gender and socioeconomic background and your education, what did you do for school? Did you go to school? And no idea. All of that has to be a conversation, but it doesn't have, and it should never be a bullet point. So, did you go?
I was just about to say, because I think people
did you go to that?
see
Yeah.
a deep conversation as something like, well, we're sitting down at 5 p.m. today.
Lord knows.
It's been agenda, and we're gonna. You can find science yesterday. At the moment, my friend is living with me for 6 weeks, and last night I got him into some shit reality show sort of thing, like The Ultimatum on Netflix.
Yes,
and he
yes.
got quite into it. And last night we're watching the end of it, what happens.
Yes, yes.
And you find out so much from people just by the fact you're commenting on a thing on the TV. And it becomes a deep conversation without you realising it.
Absolutely. And that's it right there. Keeping it light, just finding different things. Go to different places to find out, you can gauge somebody just by how they interact in various settings. That's a key. So that's why when a lot of people say, well, he came to my house, so I went to his house. And I'm saying to myself, that's not a date. You do that after you've established if this is somebody I want to date. But you get into the environment just to, you really, what you're doing is like an interview. You're interviewing them without having to have those bullet points. And I say that because when you do have those bullet points, it puts the pressure on anyone. Who wants to be sit there? Do you do this?
You have to perform.
Yes, no, that's very boring. And for me, I would feel very defensive. And most of us do, right? But I think getting people into several different environments and just having various conversations, watching various TV shows, going to different movies, and just having different debates, talking about, well, what do you think about this? Look and see what's in the news headline. Talk about it. What do you think? That gives you great insight as to who you're dating or who are your prospective boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife.
Yeah, totally. Obviously, past trauma, life experience has an impact on trust and as a result, intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say people can do to overcome that?
Well, one, therapy. I am an advocate for therapy in any form because think about this. Not only should you care about yourself first, but if you're showing up in any relationship, and most times we know from previous relationships or some of our previous behaviors, right? Something's a little off in our life, right? Go to therapy because it's really not fair showing up to someone else and expecting that they become our therapist and love me, right? Because that becomes a challenge.
And he puts them off, and you're just dragging on something that you don't need.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, so for instance, if you do get involved with someone and you both have trauma and you meet and you say, what? But displaying some things that's a little off-putting, right? You both need to go to therapy. But I say this, there are some times where you meet someone and you are in therapy, right? You're in therapy and you start dating and you're dating for quite a while, 6 months, a year. Some people say, well, Tina, I don't know, do I tell him? Because he asks, why do I have a routine of A, B, C, and D? I really want to let them know it's because of my previous situation, or I want to let them know since I experienced that trauma, these are my routines. This is what keeps me sane. This is what keeps me safe.
But we've gone back full circle here because it's back to being vulnerable and therefore having intimacy.
Thank you. So, you would know, and this is why it's so important to know whether or not you could trust, you feel comfortable enough to trust this person. Because if you ever have to have that conversation, I tell some people, no, it's too soon. And then some people, the relationship so open that sometimes the partner shares it for them. But, then you can have that conversation. If you feel like the level of maturity has grown, and you respect each other and you trust in each other and your conversations just flow, and you might have conflicting situations that you work out, then in return, you can say, listen, one of the reasons why I didn't want to commit or I don't want to commit, because some people say, why don't we commit? Why are you so afraid of committing? Well, you can probably, in a nutshell, say this is the reason why. You don't have to go into a full-blown detail, but you can say, after years of therapy, I learned that I have to really know what I want. Just, those things. So I believe that you gotta, one, like we talked about in the beginning, build that trust, build that level of trust. And that's why it's so important to connect on an emotional level, an intellectual level, a religious level, and every other level as it relates to intimacy. And so that, down the road, whether or not this is a person that you can trust with your most deepest secrets. Because some people, that's a deep secret. And other people, it's free to say, listen, I'm in therapy. And say, we're going to do this, right now, look. Right. And so I think it's important. And you only know that with the person you're with on that level when you get to a level of intimacy that works for the both of them.
Exactly. So we're getting towards the end of our time together already. So can you leave us with a pearl of wisdom?
Absolutely. I often say this, and this is something that I live by, and most of us should really live by, right? Take time to know self. Honestly, take time to know self. what you like, what you dislike, what sets you off, what offends you, what you will accept, what you don't want to accept, what your boundaries, what your religious back, every aspect, your finances, like what are you willing to work with as a whole, so that when you show up in any relationship, you're now able to show up and know exactly what you want to connect with, right? And the other
And
thing,
reassess. Because that
and
changes.
yeah, and that does change, right? And because I've been with my husband 29 years. So who I showed up as 29 years ago, I was a survivor of domestic violence, right? At that time. So I showed up extremely broken. My husband was whole. So I'm the woman, you get me? So I showed up extremely broken and had trust. Trust is trust. I trust you as far as I could see you, right? And I didn't have it together. I went to university while I was with my husband. I showed up as a single mom with one child, as a teen. You get what I'm trying to tell you? So I didn't have it together. And that's why I know, to be true, you have to build that level of trust. So for me, I've had a lot of years of therapy. But for me, and I'm not afraid to say it because it's so healthy. But for me, I had to find out while on this journey who I was, how I was, why I was, so that now I can connect with somebody who knew what he was and how he was and what he wanted or didn't want. Right. And so I think that's key. Find out who you are. And you know what? The other thing is, remember, intimacy doesn't always have to be sex. Just send a love note. Just tap on the shoulder, just whisper in the other's ear, just walk through the hallway, come out of the bathroom, go in the bathroom at the same time. Just give your partner a little look at that, whatever area that you're really, excited about. Wink your eye and say, I'll talk to you later. Just, those are the simplest things. Just let your partner know that you're still very much interested and intrigued by that intimate area of their life. There's the smallest little things. Take them luncheon. A lot of people feel like if they buy gifts, these extravagant gifts, that's amazing. That's great. But intimacy is really just a little tap, and not always a physical tap, but it's just a tap of heart, letting them know, I'm still got you. That I'm still got you. You can still trust me and we're still connected. I understand you're tired today. I can tell you had a hard day just by the way in which you walk in. Here, put your feet up. Let me give you a cup of tea. That's intimacy. That's a strong level of intimacy.
It's a look, isn't it? When you
Mm-hmm.
act away a certain way, it just know exactly what you're thinking.
Exactly what you're thinking. And that takes time, but that takes about tons of communication, and not just physical talk and communication, but it takes looking and knowing what happens at this time of their life and why are they acting like this. Sometimes we can be very frustrated, right? And so sometimes I can come in frustrated. In my previous work as a criminal justice professional, you could come in very frustrated from the various things that didn't work as you thought they should, right? What you don't need is somebody coming up against you and you're frustrated and now they're frustrated. They need to know you enough to say, okay, what happened today? Just that simple. And that's a level of intimacy, because now I know when I come home, I often say, home should be the space in which you're most safe. So I know when I come home, I know this is the place that my husband's going to say, it's okay. I could be a little girl. It's okay. Take a seat and let's talk about it. So that's why it's so important to have that level of intimacy from the outset, so that you're not spending 15, 20 years like some of our clients, you and I, trying to figure it all out.
Yeah, totally. Well, Tina, thank you so much. That's all we've got time for today. And for everybody else, if you enjoyed the show, then please subscribe, leave us a review, and more importantly, come back for the next episode. Thank you.